Very quickly, KCB profit falls to 15 billion on higher costs. That's what you can get on the BD as well. Also, exit MONUSCO. Who is next? Congo's southern neighbors are sending in a force to buttress its defenses as the UN mission lives after 25 years checkered history. The UN is warning that the security situation in the troubled East could worsen unless another mission steps in. So who will it be? Is it EAC or is it the SADC? You can get that full report there on page 4 and 5 of the East African publication. Of course, this is our weekly publication in terms of the regional matters and news within the region as well. And Taifa Leo, of course, what has been captured. Na mwamba kwenye kichwa cha mamba. All right, waziri kikangoni. Hatima ya waziri ninginia Pemba kufuatia maswali kuhusu utendakazi na ufujaji wa fedha katika wizara yake. It's all about the youth and sports cabinet secretary Ababu Namomba there, and a lot of spotlight on what is happening there. Meanwhile, just to remind you once again, Kenya's Constitution Act 13. We are unpacking the progress from a civil society's perspective. 13 years on, a lot was promised during the promulgation of the Constitution on the 27th of August 2010 when we adopted that new document. Have we lived, or has it lived to the expectations and the promise that it held for Kenyans? Let me begin with you, Kawive. Your assessment, your view from your standpoint, generally speaking, where do you think we stand right now, 13 years on down the line, the Constitution and the promise it held for Kenyans? Are we on the right track?
Maybe I should start with a quote from a speech which was given by Chief Justice Emeritus Mutunga, that we birthed a new constitution, a new baby, and we gave it to traffickers of child body parts. So basically, our new baby has been dismembered, has been sold, and we don't know. We cannot put it back together. Yes, we have the hand somewhere, like there is devolution, you can see counties. Yes, we have some things that are working, like for instance, we have got very progressive rulings by the court. We have a judiciary fund. We have some of the things are in place, but a lot more of the baby is nowhere to be seen. And the baby got lost in the non-adherence to Chapter 6, because the problem that we have in this country is the problem of leadership. And unless we are able to fix how we get our leaders and how our leaders can be held to account and be responsible, then we will not go very far with this constitution. So in my view, if we were to look at implementation of the constitution, 10 years, I think 13 years from when it was first promulgated, I'll give it a 35 out of 100.
That's quite little.
That's quite high. I mean, I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I think the others may give lower. I'm quite optimistic.
We'll hear from them right now.
Because if you look at the things that we wanted to end, the things that we wanted to deal with as a country, I can tell you, for instance, that we wanted to deal with the issue of leadership.
Right.
We wanted to deal with the issue of realization of human rights, and especially Article 43 rights. We wanted to deal with the issue of inclusion, both gender and disability or issues. We wanted to deal with the issue of equalization, equity in development. We wanted to deal with the issue of cohesion as a nation. And we wanted to deal with the issue of prudent financial management.
For public finance management.
And even the way the government is organized. Let's start from the top. The Constitution requires that the national government structures itself to be in line or in tandem with the devolution structure. The national government has refused to align itself to the devolved functions. So you find that they still maintain county commissioners, they still maintain what were districts are still maintained by the national government. They don't exist. They are not constituencies. They should be aligned to constituencies, but they don't. We have more districts, the districts as they were, but not aligned to the county. So you find the services of administration at the local level. We have a village where counties have established village councils. There's a village council and there's a chief. and both of them play overlapping roles. So in terms of the structure of government, that has not happened.
Right.
Okay. Number two, if you look at Article 43, for example, access to water, health, education, and all that, we have retrogressed instead of progressing. Many more people don't have jobs now. Many more people don't have water. Many more people don't have secure food. Many more people don't have, access to health. Because it was not planned for. That article was actually abandoned by government. When we in civil society, together with the social justice center, say right to food, march for our lives, what happens? People are demanding for food and they are beaten by police and arrested for saying that we want dignity in our livelihood. So there is that retrogression in terms of realization of rights.
All right.
When we got this constitution, the right to protest, the right to assemble, and the right to privacy were actually advancing towards realization. But now they have retrogressed. The streets have been taken. It's like protesting now is a criminal offense.
And we'll come back to that. We're going to have that conversation. Just first of all, let me get the general assessment and the mood of the other panelists as well in terms of the promise that it held 13 years on. Cornelius, do you hold the same optimism that Kenyans had 13 years ago at Uhuru Park when that document was raised by the then president and ushering in this new, dawn for us as a nation?
It's disappointing that 13 years down the line, we are still grappling with the same problems why we put for this new constitutional order. If you look at the issues that were listed in the agenda for then, under the national dialogue, they are the same issues that still developing in this country. The issue of unemployment, the issue of regional imbalance, negative ethnicity, corruption, they are still with us. It tells you that the intention of this constitution has not been met by and large. We've done well in terms of putting in place the various legislation to operation of the constitution, but what we lack is the constitutional culture. So we have a new constitutional order, but we don't have the culture that is necessary to ensure that this constitution is able to have the anticipated a positive impact on the lives of Kenyans. So I'll agree with Kaive that one of the areas in which we have failed is that this constitution has created so many institutions that were supposed to see to it that it's properly implemented. But look at the caliber of people that we have nominated or elected to office. They are defeating the very, very basic reason why we have this constitution. So it will require a change of our culture as a country to see to it that this constitution actually meets the Kenya's aspiration.
Right.
So it's a bit disappointing. I'll put it at almost 50% in terms of the legal and policy framework that has been put in place. But in terms of dealing with the underlying issues, we are doing very badly.
All right, but at least you're quite optimistic. From 35% to 50%, that's something.
I'm a bit shocked.
You're shocked? All right. All right.
You too. Yes.
Sheila and Wanjira, we're going to come back to you to get your thoughts on that, but we have to take just a quick break here on AM Live. We'd like to hear your thoughts on this topic. The hashtag we're using this morning is AM Live NTV at NTV Kenya. At Zainab Ismail, talk to us. We're going to be back in a very short while. Stay with us.
Enjoy. Pishi Bomba in association with Ajab Home Baking Flour.
Enjoy cooking your favorite meals with Ajab and freestyle your way to deliciousness. It's easy to knead, easy to roll, and quick to prepare. Ajab Home Baking Flour, the flour that does more.
What surgical care means basically is that those are conditions that require some form of surgery in its management, either for curing the disease or for palliation if the disease cannot be cured.
What exactly is the big issue that sometimes would lead to lack of enough personnel to deal with some of these cases that might need surgical care?
One main issue would be the cost.
Because if you even when you just look at the national budget and see how much resources are located in healthcare vis-a-vis education and other sectors, then you find that healthcare is given a road
Another thing would be a lot of us work for the counties. So our counties need us because we are also fueling the county. So also the county has to think about, we need care for the patients. Also, we do need specialists as well.
Nilinunua shamba na nilipanda mimea ya kuuza marikiti, lakini ukame ukanirudisha magotini. Oh, oh.
To get Mariana, dial *811*850#.
Skiza, non-nation.
Sir, where are you going? You can't come here!
Where's the girl who was driving?
They took her by ambulance.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because I didn't tell you. That's not important now. What's important is that Volodenko and Puluya are back together again.
Yes, and they both hate me.
To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
All right, welcome back to the program. You are watching AM Live and TV this week, this day, as we canvass around the issue of the Constitution, Katiba at 13. What progress have we made so far? Are we on the right track? That's the conversation we are having, and we'd love to hear from you. The hashtag, as always, is AM Live and TV. And just to remind you, I'm with Cornelius Odwor, Deputy Executive Director, KHRC, Sheila Masinde, Executive Director, Transparency International Kenya, Kawive Omboa, the Deputy CEO, Inuka Kenya, Nisisi, and Wanjiru, the co-founder of Mathare Social Justice Center. And of course, after a long struggle for a constitution that would suddenly be responsive to the social, economic, and political needs of Kenyans, have we made any progress so far 13 years down the line? Well, Kawive gives it about 35% when it comes to the Constitution, and Cornelius about 50% in terms of the progress we've made. But Sheila, do you agree? Do you share the same optimism?
I mean, I remain optimistic, as I was 13 years ago when the Constitution was passed and we promulgated it. And I believe that if we get certain things right, we will eventually get there and implement it in its entirety. Mm-hmm. But right now, when I think about the implementation, one thing that comes to mind is a parable of new wine in old wineskin. Mm. You know, you pour new wine into old wineskin, it will burst, the skin will burst. Yeah? And that's what's really happening, because we have a new constitution, but we have the old, you know, leadership, people who have not really reformed. When you look at cultural issues. The structures are the same? Well, but in terms of particularly the people responsible, the people responsible for implementing this constitution, when you look at our political leadership, it's more or less the same. They have not woken up to the realities of the new constitution. And for this new constitution to be implemented in its entirety, it will mean that we really need new leadership in this country, you know, that believes in this constitution. Because I think that we have, when you look at the various breaches in regard to even the compliance and adherence to the rule of law and some of the decisions that have been made that are outside of this constitution, then you know that we have people who really don't care about this constitution, or maybe who don't understand it. Yeah. When you look at, for instance, we've just been talking about Chapter 6. For me, that's a basic element of this constitution. If you cannot respect the leadership and integrity provisions as dictated in this constitution, then we're basically not going to go anywhere in regard to any of the other provisions. We have Article 10 on the national values and principles of governance. When you look at them, issues around good governance, accountability, public participation, inclusion, social justice, respect for human rights, and look at everything that has happened in this country in the last 13 years, especially in the last 1 year or so, then you know for sure that we have people who do not understand or respect this constitution. When you look at Article 43, economic and social rights, the right to the right to health, freedom from hunger, the right to water, education, and look at some of the decisions that have been made, including, the raising the cost of basic goods, then it means that there are people who are making decisions but without really applying the constitutional provisions that have been put therein. So we really need to look at it. Because if you have a good constitution, but you have bad people, then what you will get is a bad constitutional implementation.
Right. Wanjira, your thoughts?
For me, I'm going to, of course, agree with my panelists, but also development for me is development for the people in terms of implementation of the constitution. And going back to not just 13 years ago, but let's say since we became a republic, what progress have the Kenyan people seen from the leadership that has been from the era of Jomo Kenyatta to Moi to Kibaki to Uhuru and now Ruto? I think it is sad that despite even this very progressive document that is our constitution, most of the living conditions are still the same. Even getting worse, if I might say, because the high cost of living right now is unbearable, and the constitution, as Sheila has said, protects us from these very hard living conditions. The implementation of the Bill of Rights, for example, which I think it's really an integral part of the constitution and something every Kenyan citizen needs to be conversant with, every Kenyan youth, Gen Z, everybody who is Kenyan needs to be having the Bill of Rights at their fingertips. And also Article 1, which speaks about the sovereignty of the people of Kenya. That has not very much been internalized by the Kenyan population, because yes, the leaders, the political leaders, all these institutions have a right to implement the constitution, but Kenyans also have a responsibility of ensuring that these rights are upheld, that things are running okay, because I think there's a lot of complaints that we have on Twitter, KOT, hashtags, but really, I think there need to be more concerted efforts about protecting our rights, about defending, about pushing back on the gains that we have made that are likely to be eroded. I know you know what I mean by that, but yeah, I think there should be more active citizenry. Yeah.
All right, and I like you raised the issue of Chapter 1 of the Constitution, and Kawivu, when you look at that, I mean, so the Constitution declares in its preamble, it is we the people, so suddenly, which means that sovereign power rests entirely on the people of Kenya. But do you think we, the citizenry, understand our rights?
I think there are two gaps there. The first one is that since the promulgation of the Constitution, the government has a responsibility to educate Kenyans on what's happening. I think that responsibility has not been honored. The civil society has done a lot of work in terms of education, civic education and all that. And we can say the awareness of Kenyans, especially on their rights, the right to assembly, the right to food, they have that awareness, but they don't know what to do with it. Not 100%, but they do not know what to do with it or how to go about it. And then the second thing is that the government does not respect the sovereignty of Kenyans. Look at the finance.
So is it the government, or is it like what Sheila had said, the people who hold those positions of power, the individuals, the people who are in leadership, they're the ones who do not respect?
But it's the whole infrastructure of government. Because when you are elected or when you are appointed to perform a function of government, then you become part of the government. So that exercise of donated power should be in support of the sovereignty of the people. What is happening is that they are not recognizing the sovereignty of Kenyans to make decisions. And I was giving the example of the Finance Act. 93% of Kenyans said no, it was implemented anyway, it was passed. And now people are paying house tax. You know, it sounds like the colonial
the housing
tax
of the
1920s.
tax, right.
Of the 1920s. It is the same. Because you are paying for a house even when you don't need one. And therefore, the will of Kenyans, we donate our power to people, to leaders, and then they take it all. And they start killing us. You go to protest, you are killed. Recently, we had reports about 50 or so people, I think from Imulu, we had about 50 or so people who were killed by shooting. You know, so it doesn't make sense that at some point you think in 2010 we thought, oh, we have a new country, Kenya belongs to us. But increasingly, it doesn't. There are some people who own Kenya, whether you like it or not, whether you have a voice or not, they'll still go on to do what they wanted anyway. So that's the basic questions of Article 1 of sovereignty of the people and how the exercise of power is anticipated in the Constitution. The one question of Article 10, basic principles of governance, has not been followed. Take, for instance, public participation. Public participation is executed for the national and county governments. The national government created guidelines for county governments to follow in 2018. The national government does not have any framework, principles, guideline, or even a law for public participation. The one that was proposed by Honorable Wako when he was a senator is still a draft from 2018. Why? So the national government does not want to talk to you citizens. Mkae huko, so that we run government. No, that's the attitude. So we wanted to take Kenya from the ants of the kind of leadership we saw in Moi, saying, please release Kenya to us, allow us to participate in decision making and all that. That is what the Constitution said. But now it has been taken back. I think that is critical for us to appreciate that there is education, yes, but there is also application. That what you know needs to translate into something meaningful for you as a Kenyan.
So where is the missing link when it comes to that, the implementation part of it then?
The missing link...
Is it lack of goodwill? Is it lack of information by the citizenry? Where does that challenge lie?
I think it's lack of goodwill and the fact that if the people in government implement the Constitution, they will kill personal gain. And the structure of leadership in this country is about getting into government, getting into these planned positions so that you make benefit for yourself.
All right.
Now, the Constitution anticipates that you get in there to create public good and to create public services. That is what is being resisted. That's why the Constitution is not being implemented. That is why for 13 years, the basic things about structure, the basic things about inclusion, the basic things about provision of services has remained in the hands of technocrats and the political elite. And they keep on having discussions. These cases, like for instance, the case of the attack on Oparanya, you know, for example, why has it come now? And then the second question is, do you see the reaction by the Azimio? They're threatening to get out of the talks. So it may not go anywhere because it doesn't matter whether it is true or not. First, it's coming in too late, and then it gets a political interpretation.
All right.
Look at the people who President Ruto got into his government. They had cases. He said, no, it was political. They were being, because they are associating with me. So all those cases evaporated. The ODPP removed the cases. So at the end of the day, it didn't matter what Kenyans say. It didn't matter the sovereign will, the need to have good leadership. There are some people whose decisions override the decisions of Kenyans. Look at the case of the rogue police officer in Mathare. What was his name? Rashid. He's been there. He's seen killing their reels. It was shown, but nothing happens to him. Why? Try.
I think that case is still in
it's
court.
Still
I
in
believe,
court.
right?
It's still in court.
Right.
But
yes,
also I have
yes,
noticed
Wanjira.
a trend also with these cases in court, because just when we are about to pronounce the judgment, there's always postponement. There are other cases, but it's always, it has been adjourned, it has been postponed, it has been postponed. So again, going back to goodwill of the people that are holding public office. And also, not just their goodwill, but also there really is a lack of information among the general public, and that is why Kawive was saying that the civil society is really trying to sensitize the general public. The social justice movement holds a lot of community dialogues on discussing the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Article 43 of the Kenyan Constitution, because that is very fundamental in terms of the social and economic rights of Kenyans. Right to food, right to water, right to highest attainable health care. I mean, very good provisions by the Constitution, but really it's just on paper. And until we are having very many people aware of this, we will not be able to actualize some of these very progressive promises that the 2010 Constitution.
They will still remain promises.
They will still
10 years
remain
down
promises.
the line.
Yes.
There's something I wanted to say before I finish. That the retrogression that we are seeing is monumental. If you look at the Business Daily, a story here which we have not talked about, the tapping of funds. Do you know laws about anti-terrorism and money laundering? There are people who are terrorists, there are people who are money launderers, okay? But the legalization of tapping of funds, do you know what that means? You will never have a private conversation. Your data, your security is totally gone. And this can be used across board. It opens up. If I decide to suspect you as a money launderer, that's it. I just need as a law enforcement officer to decide that you are likely to be money laundering. And that's the end of your life, because you are tapped throughout. Of course, we know there is tapping and all that, but it's illegal. You can say no to it. Now, it can be taken to court. And this is like opening a dark hole where you say, as long as you are suspected of terrorism, and civil society have been victims, you get money from donors, but if you don't, the government does not like your activities, they slap you. They slapped Muhuri with anti-launderism, Aki Africa, the same thing. Innocent people, but it is the law. So this is a very dangerous threat. It's basically having the government inside your personal life, and instead of investing in providing food and water and health, why are you investing in following everybody's phones? You can't even have a telephone call for 3 minutes because it drops. You're being tapped.
All right, I'll get to you, and let me hear from Cornelius as well. Has been quite quiet in terms of that, the vision of democracy, justice, and respect to human rights, especially of some of these things that have been spoken about. Do you think then it is a lack of the information? Once again, I want to get your thoughts on that. The lack of information by the citizenry on just lack of touch in terms of the rights that are already envisaged in the Constitution when it comes to those particular rights?
If you look at Article 1, it talks about the responsibility. Every person has a responsibility to protect, promote, and uphold this Constitution. So it's therefore a civic responsibility on the part of general public to understand this Constitution and agitate for its full implementation. That has not happened because of largely we have not been able to utilize the level of awareness that has been done largely by civil society into some civic action on the part of citizens. But citizens alone are not to blame for the state of we are in. Largely, the state institutions that have been created by this institution, by the Constitution, have not been able to also live up to the call of this Constitution. And I relate this with the whole issue of the state capture. Because we have parliament, we have judiciary, we have institutional commissions, constitutional commissions, and even independent offices that were supposed to be at the top of the game. But these institutions have also been captured in a way that they are not being able to play their role effectively. So what I'm saying is that what we lack is a transformative leadership that is able to walk along with the aspirations of Kenyans as far as the constitutional aspirations are concerned. So perpetual failure by the leadership in this country, especially the political leadership, is what has made us to be where we are today. Because they give promises, but they fail. And that's why Chapter 6 is very critical. We can't afford a situation whereby people can lie to the public during campaigns and turn around against the very promises that they gave. And I think it will require that citizens are able now to go back and use their sovereign power to ensure that they are able to put in place a transformative leadership right from the village level up to the presidency. That way we stand a better chance of fully implementing this constitution.
Right. Yeah. Sheila, weakened government institution perhaps also play an aspect into why we are where we are when it comes to the issue of at least trying to implement some of these things that are within the constitution.
Yes, I agree. When you look at the chapter 15 that set out the commissions and independent offices, because for me these are critical institutions in the implementation of the constitution. But why are we struggling in regard to the protection of human rights? And you have the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Why are we struggling in terms of issues around land rights? And we have the National Land Commission. Why are we struggling in regard to the issues around, say, in terms of accountability in public finance, and we have the Office of the Auditor General, we have the Controller of Budget, and so on, and I could go on and on. It's because some of these institutions have been curtailed in regard to their financial and even functional independence. And because they know that they have to go to Parliament and they have to, can I use the word, kowtow to the executive at some point to be able to get their budgets and so that they can be able to function, it means that they have to play nice, you know, and that I think to some extent has curtailed, you know, their effectiveness in terms of execution of their mandate. When I've observed how they have performed, you feel like they're walking kind of on eggshells, and they really don't want to upset, you know, the executive. They don't want to upset Parliament, because if you do so, then you may not be able to get your funds and other resources that they require to be able to perform. But also on the other hand, when you look at their budgets, even they basically just have money to just operational, to meet the operational expenses. I was talking to someone from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights the other day. They don't even have money for in terms of fuel, so they can be able to move across the country, reach out to citizens and promote what we're talking about in terms of just educating citizens in regard to their rights. And then that even brings me to another point on why sometimes you get the sense that citizens don't really understand what is in the Constitution, yet when you look at Article 1, it clearly said that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and can only be exercised in accordance with the Constitution. And we delegate this power to the people that we elect, whether at county or national level, and so on. Now, there's been a big problem in regard to civic education. No one, apart from, yes, we are as civil society, I've seen sometimes the church has tried to carry out some elements of civic education, but we do this at great difficulty because we are not resourced to do that. You know, we can't sustain civic education. We simply don't have adequate money to be able to do that.
It would need
but
massive
then that should have been done. It's actually a responsibility of government. But when was the last time you had any entity of government doing any form of civic education? Even if when you dig through the budgets, how much has been allocated to civic education, both at the national and the county level? I attended the Devolution Conference last week, and one of the conversations that came out in one of the sessions was the need for civic education at the county level, but county governments don't have budgets for that. Even when you talk about public participation, you know, this constitution requires that there is adequate public participation, and not public participation for the sake of ticking a box, but meaningful public participation. But that's really not happening because, again, there's a question around resources, but also the political will. Because I believe that if we had political will, say for civic education, for public participation, then resources would be able to follow. But I think right now, sometimes you get the sense that there's an attempt to keep citizens in the dark, because when you deny them information, deny them opportunities and mechanisms to be able to participate, then they will not be able to hold you accountable. So we really need to work and push more in regard to how much do citizens know, how much information do they have, so that they can be able to fully exercise their rights in accordance with the Constitution.
Right. And with that as well, I mean, Kawive, we're looking at that, the issue of weakened government institutions. I believe, if you can remember, as we transitioned to a new government, we saw cases that were already held by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped. Of course, there was a lot of talk of political interference on that front. So there was that. But also, in terms of how the judiciary has taken over the mandate that they have been given by the Constitution. Just the other day, when the president decided to appoint 50 cabinet administrative secretaries, the judiciary made its stance on the same and said this is unconstitutional. It's not the first time that we've seen the judiciary come out strongly, quite effectively in the recent past. Are we then perhaps going to say that, despite the many challenges and issues that we're facing in terms of the progress, there's still some leeway? There's a track that we're heading in the positive direction.
I think there are definitely some things that are progressive, but overall, we can say that when we're talking about a government, we're talking about three arms: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So in all these, we can say there are some things that are progressive. Like, for instance, the closing of ranks between MPs on accountability of CSS is a positive thing by Parliament. But that's like the only positive thing for the since they came in. Because everything else, they have been rubber stamping the executive. So that's a positive thing. The ruling about the CSS is very positive. The ruling by Justice Thande to have the finance bill, not implemented is positive. But it's like we do a seesaw. We go positive, then we go negative all the way. Today, Justice Thande has been transferred. I don't know whether it was punitive or not, but she cannot continue in that case, in whatever session she was. Today, another court passed what was stopped by the High Court. It passed
at the Court of Appeal.
So, which direction have we gone? Towards the left. Some of the things that
it's a seesaw kind of a situation.
So it's a seesaw. It's like we are making one step, then we take 4 backwards. Very huge 4 steps backwards. So the problem that we have is one, that these institutions either deliberately do not understand or they have been compromised in terms of understanding and applying their constitutional rights. Parliament, there's a time I started the discourse that we do not have a parliament. What we have is an extension of the executive. Because Parliament is supposed to protect public interest. Which public interest has been protected by Parliament so far? What they go to talk about is not about citizens, by and large. Okay? So now this glimmer of hope, when they are saying CSS, whether you are Kenya Kwanza or not, you must account, is a glimmer of hope. And I would like to encourage them, parliamentarians, to please seek for political and constitutional independence from the executive. Do not become appendages of the executive, please. And then the judiciary, I think there is the rule of law, and we expect that the trend of protecting public interest, because that's the point. It is public interest. It's not about government interest. If they appreciate that, then it is possible to get correct rulings, to get not correct, but progressive, pro-people rulings, because that's what we are. The previous constitution, the one that we had from 1963, the first clause was about government. Kenya shall be a republic. So the organization of government was in itself complete without people. But this, our new constitution, talks about sovereignty of people. The first article, sovereignty of the people. So public interest must be the spirit of the, and when we talk about the spirit of the constitution, is what is not explicitly said, but is implicit, is implied. So that then the interpretation of functions, the interpretation of the work that they do can be, how does it, I think that the litmus test would be, how does what I have done protect the people of Kenya? How does it advance their realization of rights? How does it make the lives of mothers and fathers and children better in this country? That should be the spirit of public service. And if anytime you do an action and it doesn't meet that threshold, then you should drop that action. Right. Taxation does not improve the life of Kenyans. Over-taxation. Lack of provision of services like in health and all that. And why, for instance, and I know President Ruto talked about this, devolving functions. Why is there more money in health at the national level and little money at the county level? And yet health is a devolved service. Some of these things don't make sense. Why does the national government have an administrative structure up to the ground, and the county governments have got structures of administration up to the ground? Does it make sense? What really is the function of that administrative function, and why can't they be merged? Why is it that the national government does not have a framework for public participation when it has 85% of the budget? I mean, they have 85 shillings and they don't want you to talk about it. They have not put a law, they have not put a framework. The question of threshold is not there. You don't know what the national government is doing. And yet they have 85 shillings out of the 100 that we have as a nation. I think it's only fair that we say, especially on that, on respecting the rights of Kenyans, the government has performed dismally. Maybe if you look at the question of corruption, for example, and you go to the Nation on page 23, there's a story of Kilifi County. 11 officers from CECs have been sent home for allegations of graft. Now at the national level, 4, 5 CSS are on the spot, and one of them has said he will not resign. What can you do?
Okay.
You know, basically.
Right,
so
and you open up that space of the issue of devolution. And Wanjira, let me get to you. I mean, so devolution held the promise to decentralize power to the people so that people can be able to enjoy the fruits of, you know, devolution and development. 10 years down the line, of course, last week, the devolution conference, marking that a decade on. Have we achieved that? Because, okay, so, you know, there's those who say, we have seen the benefit of devolution, right? We have seen, you know, we've had roads, you can be able to access rural areas in this country. We've had electrification across the country. But then there's also those glaring issues that Kawiva speaks about in terms of the healthcare sector, perhaps, which was devolved, but the national government continues to have a whole, you know, tight grip in terms of that sector. Do you think then we have made the right steps when it comes to the issue of devolution? But also importantly, what I wanted to touch on is that issue of corruption, because that's been the biggest conversation around what is known as now devolved graft, you know, and what we used to hear, you know, Mtukufu Raisi, now we have mini presidents within these county governments as well.
Devolution in itself, it's a very positive thing because it seeks to take away the presidential powers that were there initially before the new constitution. So devolution in itself is a very positive thing, but has its own challenges that Kawive has highlighted. And I think that we have the mini presidents within our counties should make it very easy for the people to hold them accountable, to access their offices, to bring their petitions, to bring their issues. So again, I am placing a lot of responsibility on the people, because no one is going to give you sovereignty unless you acknowledge yourself as a sovereign citizen and occupy that office as a sovereign citizen by yourself or as community.
Like, for example, you can take the Uasin Gishu County situation there as an example of the situation. So we have a former governor who has been involved, you know, yet to be, you know, charged in court for that, which is, you know, the issues of mismanagement of funds. And, you know, you have, in terms of the scholarship issue, the Finland scholarship issue, he was re-elected in a different capacity as a senator of the same county. So then, you know, then what does that speak to? Is it us, the people who vote?
It is us. Even not just that position, there are many other positions that we know very well that this person is corrupt. We know very well what they represent, but somehow we still find ourselves voting them into positions of power, hoping maybe they will change or act better or deliver more. But if I show you who I am, believe me, if the people have, if our leaders have come out and we have seen their track record, I think we should believe them and take them for what we are, and really internalize Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. There's a clip that was going around on WhatsApp about the leadership in Dubai, and the gentleman was being asked, why has Dubai suddenly become very rich and everybody wants to go to Dubai? And he said, it's the leadership. We have nothing. If we look at Nigeria, for example, it's very rich with the oil and all that, but our leadership is what has propelled us to this level. Kenya as well, we are a resourceful country. We have so much wealth. Yet, our people are quite on the poverty level. So our leadership has been failing us, but also the citizenry has not been occupying its leadership of sovereignty and living that. You had also asked me to speak about corruption. Corruption, public theft, more plainly put, has been such a cancer in the country for a long time. From the time of Uhuru Kenyatta saying we lose 2 billion every single day. Do you know what 2 billion could do in informal settlements, in Turkana, in these very poor places in our country? A lot, a lot. So I have been wondering, how do we recover this money, the EACC, how do we recover this money and use it for public good? Again, occupying ourselves, our sovereignty seat as Kenyans. I really like the Constitution because it gives us that sovereign power. And I feel if we really get that, we could do so much good for ourselves and for our nation and for the people. So corruption needs to be taken very seriously, and serious measures taken to curb corruption. There's almost no repercussion for corruption. There's almost an elevation of corrupt people. There's almost a congratulatory something. It's barely, for me, my experience with what I've seen with public officials, NYS scandals, we see people getting better leadership positions and better government jobs or something. So we wonder, is government encouraging corruption? Somebody in the community was asking me, or should they legalize corruption? So we know this is how we do things in Kenya. You go to a government office, pay something little, get your services. But you see, that would be retrogressing and killing the spirit of patriotism and unity and equity and moving together with the rule of law in particular. So stringent measures on corrupt politicians would really help curb this corruption menace. There's a country that they kill corrupt politicians. I'm not saying kill them, but
a little way to go, right?
Yeah.
But yes, we can hear from Cornelius. I'll get to you in a moment. But you know, so this dispensation sadly held the promise to cure those things. So first of all, the issue of the concentrated political power, and then the issue of corruption, which was there immensely during the independence all the way up to 2010. But then, has anything changed?
Devolution, I must say, it was a key hallmark of this constitution, and by and large, it has tried. The essence that quite a significant amount of resources have been devolved to the 47 counties. I think we are past 1 trillion since devolution started. And the challenge we have is that from the onset, there was a principle that resources will follow functions. The Transition Authority did not do a good job with regard to this principle, because we were not able to unpackage the functions and cost them appropriately in terms of what was supposed to go to the counties. Now we have a situation whereby counties have been given a very huge responsibility, because ours generally is a developmental devolution. Counties, their basic mandate is service delivery, but they have not been given adequate resources to ensure that they are able to do these functions adequately. Why? The same issue about political goodwill, the kind of leadership that believes that everything still must be. We are still suffering from the hangover of centralization. Now, with the devolved governments, we are also seeing emergence of centralization at the county level. We were trying to devolve from the national level, but now the county, we are also centralizing, because you don't see anything significant beyond the county headquarters. When you go to the sub-counties, to the ward, up to the villages, the lower you go, the devolution fades very much. The role of the ward administrators is not clearly operationalized in the counties, the sub-county administrators. If anything, now power revolves around the governor and all our close people. And this part of the reason why devolution appears to be failing. Why we were devolving was also to open up the democratic space, to give people power to determine how they want to be governed. But that is not happening, because the kind of leadership that we put in place appears to stifle that space for public participation. So what we require and what to make devolution work is to open up the space. I'm very much disappointed by various county assemblies in this country. They are not able to hold the county executive to account. And it's largely because of the kind of people, again, the kind of people we put in these places, whose interest is first, what can I get, what is there for me?
Right.
And that's why I keep on saying that we need to some kind of re-engineering, political engineering, to ensure that we are able to put the right people in position of leadership. Otherwise, devolution is a good thing, but failure by the institutions that we've created to support devolution is what is causing all this mess.
All right. Okay. Yes. Yes, Sheila.
Yeah. I think for me, the basic of where things have gone wrong from the onset is in regard to the selection and election of people who are sitting in critical leadership positions. And Chapter 6 is quite clear in regard to, when you look at Article 73(2)(a), which requires that selection for public office should be based on personal integrity. But when you look at the caliber of people from parliament, from the executive, everywhere, and even now, unfortunately, even people who are serving in some of these critical independent offices and commissions that have critical mandate in regard to implementing this constitution, is that they're not suitable for public office. We have the wrong people in office. And until we get that right, then we'll continue to decry that problem of corruption. The other aspect is that there have simply been no consequences, no punishment, at least not sufficiently punitive for acts committed in regard to corruption or economic crime or any ethical breaches.
Right.
You know, I commit a crime or I do something unethical, I will still be in office. And I will stand boldly and say, I will not resign, you know, as if it is a right for me to stay in public office. Listen, it is not anyone's right to be in public office. Yeah, citizens put you in public office, you know, but we have it all wrong, such that people who then get into public office feels that it's an entitlement. And that's why in Kenya, I'm saying there are no consequences. You know, someone has been found in breach of whether it is Chapter 6 or any other aspect of the Constitution, but they're so entitled that they feel that they must remain in public office, and our citizens will then feel helpless in terms of removing them from that public office. So the issue of punishment, the issue of consequences for corruption is something that we have to look at. So that's why it's very worrying, even to the extent that some of these investigations or cases that have been had or conducted in regard to corruption have actually collapsed.
Right.
That actually enhances impunity in this country because it reinforces that attitude of utadu. Utadu.
Or who am I aligned to?
Yes, you'll take me, you'll investigate me, you'll take me to court. If I'm politically connected, the case will be withdrawn. And even if it gets to the point where I am convicted, there's power of mercy. The president will exercise the power of mercy and forgive me and pardon me, even if I've been convicted, sitaka jela, you know. So that actually enhances that culture of impunity, such that then me as a public officer, responsible for resources, because I know how things go in this system, in the criminal justice system. I will be investigated, I will go to court, but I'll still find a way of escaping justice until we deal with some of these issues and ensure that there's proper justice and accountability for acts on corruption and economic crime. Then I'm sorry, but we'll continue to be in this particular conundrum in regard to Chapter 6 and also corruption.
Okay, and I want us to take another quick break here on AM Live NTV this morning. The hashtag as always is AM Live NTV. Talk to us. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back. Stay with us.
Acne's Creamy Wash is a foamy and gentle cleanser that removes sebum and dirt in the pores. Step 2. Acne Sealing Toner maintains skin pH. Step 3. Acne Sealing Gel quickly clears pimple-causing bacteria. The latent acne clears, cares, and helps prevent pimple.
when you're finally released from pain. That moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
Benefits of ordering with Glovo. Glovo allows you to order anything you want at the comfort and convenience of your home. Craving fried chicken, or pilau, or pizza? Easy and simple. Order on Glovo today. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes. With Glovo, you order anything unataka, and when you get it una celebrate because kukuchoma imefika, na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Order Glovo, will deliver in minutes.
Mama Stevo, where are the kids?
I think they're upstairs doing their revision.
Oh, you guys are here. Maria and Steve, which revision papers are you doing today?
Baba, mimi nashughulikia maswali ya marudio ya somo la Kiswahili kutoka kwa gazeti la Taifa leo.
Na wewe?
I am working on the mathematics revision paper from the Junior Sport magazine of the Daily Nation.
Wow, this is wonderful. Are the revision papers from Taifa Leo and Daily Nation working for you guys?
Yes, Dad. Wanauliza maswali yao kwa njia nzuri na nyepesi sana.
And the questions are in tandem with our syllabus.
Dear parents, invest in Taifa Leo and Junior Sport for KCPE and KCSE revision papers. Kwa maswali ya gazeti la Taifa Leo, usiukose uhondo huo kila Jumatatu hadi Jumamosi. In our Junior Sport, it's every Monday. Do not miss out.
All right, welcome back to the program. Once again, you're watching M Live NTV this morning as we canvass around the Constitution at 13, the promulgation of the Constitution that happened on the 27th of August back in 2010. So 13 years down the line, are we on the right track? And especially when we speak on the issue of implementation on some of those aspects, let me talk about this particular matter that continues to remain a sore in the Constitution, which is Article 27, which provides that not more than 2/3 of the members of any elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. We did hear the president when he was appointed that he promised that things will change on that front. And, you know, this gender quota has been quite an issue. We've seen different bills in Parliament that has never been implemented up until now. The conversation continues to just move from one government to the other, Kowive. Where do we stand on that particular matter? Are we ever going to see a space, you know, a leadership that will be able to help us move and jump over that step, which is, you know, an issue of inclusion and something that, you know, has been attained in the Constitution ever since 2010?
Thank you very much. I think the biggest problem that we have had as a nation is the entrenchment of patriarchy, a carryover from our traditional cultures. And of course, patriarchy thrives on the suppression and oppression of women. So the architecture of the Constitution is one of equality, where men and equal have equal opportunities and equal access to opportunities. And therefore, the constitutional principle of not more than 2/3 of either gender, in my view, is very modest. Should be 50-50, in my view. Equality. So there are 50 in terms of access, 50 in terms of individuals, 50%.
And that's a beautiful, you know, thing, you know, an idea. But we are far from that.
No, the Constitution is modest. It says not more than 2/3.
Right.
So let's start from there.
Right.
And then the reason is that there are structural, cultural, and institutional problems that hinder the achievement of equal rights for men and women, and those are the things that needed to be dropped. But if you look at Parliament itself, first, Kenyans. Let's start with Kenyans. Kenyans themselves have not moved on to appreciate women as leaders equal to men. So very few women are elected, even at the election level. We can even throw in the issue about resources, that men somehow have got more resources than women in most of the areas. And we can even throw in the issue of our political culture, the question of violence, and we can even throw in the thing about lack of a level playing ground. So end point, less women are elected into Parliament. The court, when a case was taken by civil society to say, because the constitution is very clear, if it is not more than 2/3, it's unconstitutional.
Right.
And to say that the Parliament be disbanded. And even the Supreme Court gave an advisory to the president to disband Parliament.
That didn't happen.
What did the president do? He kept quiet. So nothing moved. And you see, unless we are able to demonstrate that, even now, I don't think the cabinet of President Ruto is compliant to the 2/3 case, is it? No, I don't think it is. So nobody in government, nobody in Parliament, nobody sort of thinks about that constitutional principle. Right now, the ministry, I think the Minister of Gender, has set up a committee to see how to implement the 2/3 gender. And there are proposals that have been floated, key of which is how do you constitutionally ensure that this happened. But all the efforts from 2010 until now have gone to naught. We would have had a beautiful opportunity if the president has disbanded Parliament. Let people go home and every Kenyan becomes aware. Instantly, everybody would have been aware, they have come back home. What's the problem? There are no women. And that would have solved that problem. So the action of the president by not disbanding Parliament is what is the problem for us. Because the court was very progressive, very clear.
We've had the promises, but the commitment, I think, is the issue when it comes to the implementation of this and the actualization of this constitutional requirement.
Yeah, the promises, but you know, when there's a court ruling, the promise should not happen. You respect the courts.
Right.
Actually, I think
the
now,
court has already made itself clear on this matter.
Actually now we need to renew that case. And I think it's something that we are pursuing as civil society. We just go and say this was not implemented. We indict the president, the current president, because it is about the office. So the president has to act. Because we have to sort this together. We've had patriarchy, the thing about men thinking that they have become leaders, thinking that women are not able to lead, women are not able to achieve the things that men can achieve, and it is very annoying. Actually, there's a slogan that says, "Whatever a man can do, a woman can do better." And we've seen women who are solid paragons of virtue, who have got very good leadership skills, but they do not get opportunity, they don't get access. So I think it's only humanizing.
All right.
For this principle to be enacted, and I think we should call on the president. Maybe we have the case cited again, so that the president can help us from the top to just sort this thing out. Because all these commissions, all these committees, all these efforts seem to be going to naught so far.
Right. And Wanjira, your thoughts on the same as we take a look. This constituted gender task force hasn't made any leeway in terms of trying to bring us closer to the implementation of this much sought after requirement that is already entrenched in the constitution.
Okay, for me, first of all, I think we are making a bit of progress on that. We have seen these past elections, a lot more women have been voted in. For example, Nakuru County, my own constituency, Mathare, we have 2 female members of County Assembly. So I think there's some steps, but we are yet to get there where we achieve the 2/3 gender rule. And it is because majority of Kenyan men do not think women can lead properly. I was at a polling station during the elections, and we could hear conversations about I'm not going to vote for a woman. We are not ready for women leadership. This is very factual. And I think also the women that have been elected into leadership positions need to really hold the position with high regard, knowing that they are also doing this for the women behind them, really achieve. Because also at our center, we usually say, it is not so much about your gender, but so much about your leadership, so much about what you're able to bring to the table. So also, as we push for the truth as gender role, we are also saying, let us have leaders with high integrity, leaders who deliver, and women leaders who make women look like they can lead. And we have very great women leaders in grassroots and who have offered themselves for elective positions. For example, Edith Ocheng from Kibera, absolutely phenomenal woman. And so it is to say that we need Kenyans to see and embrace the leadership of women, like the Nakuru County, and also women to deliver on that promise.
All right. And Cornelius, are we perhaps moving in the right direction, but sort of missing on some key points when it comes to this? Because interestingly, in that gender task force that was constituted and gazetted, there's a lot of heavy criticism on that as well, because apparently in the 7-member multi-sectoral working group on that committee, there's only one man. So this is another issue that has come out, sort of, a committee that is flouting the same principles that is sort of, trying to seek to implement.
I think the issue of the 2000 has always been in Kenyan context a women's issue.
Right.
And we've been warned by that it will reach a point when it's men who will be fighting for this inclusion. And that notwithstanding, I think on the political front, I'll put it squarely on the failure by political parties. Because we've seen a scenario whereby we have heavily commercialized our politics. And the commercialization of our politics has been disadvantageous, especially to the women, because we are largely coming from a patriarchal society where men control the factors of production. And therefore, to the extent that one's ability to be elected in a political office also depends on the amount of resources you are able to mobilize. That has more or less given men advantage over women. So failure by the political parties to put mechanisms to ensure that affirmatively they are able to nominate women to positions where they can compete competitively in electoral politics is something that has largely contributed to the imbalance, especially in our parliaments, the county assembly, national assembly, and the Senate. So we need reforms on how political parties are established and managed. If you look at everything else, they revolve around these key individuals. When they move from one political vehicle to the other political party then dies automatically. It means, therefore, it's not the political ideology. If people are just following these, what I'll call regional or tribal kingpins. So there's need for that to happen. Yeah.
All right, Sheila, your thoughts on that as well? Yeah. We are in a space where this has been a conversation for the longest time. Well, there seems to be some sort of stride. Some would say that, but others say it's just another promise, but still no light at the end of the tunnel. But from your standpoint, where are we on this?
It all goes back to the issue of accountability. And I think no one has sufficiently been held accountable for the failure to meet that 2/3 gender requirement. One, for instance, is when this particular administration was in the campaigns, they promised that 50% of government would be 50-50 civil. It was 50% women, 50% men.
That's the ideal.
That was a promise that was given. That was a promise
at the beginning.
That was a promise from President Ruto during the campaigns that his would be a gender balanced government. But come the appointment of cabinet secretaries, remember only 7. It was out of 21?
21.
Out of 21, 7 women. Out of 51 principal secretaries, 51, 11 women. yeah, were named, you know. So we keep flouting that requirement from in the constitution, but also in terms of the political promises that have been made. When you look at parliament, I think we have now 28 elected women, leave alone the women, the county women representatives, but just elected women from the single constituencies. And then you look at Senate, we only have 3 elected women, not considering the ones who are nominated. So clearly we are far, far, far behind, but I think it's because we have not held institutions that are responsible to deliver this particular provision of the Constitution responsible. One is the political parties, in terms of who they nominate. I would expect that as they work out, as they do their nominations and give tickets to those who will contest, they will also look at the issue of gender representation to ensure that a number of women are also put out there and given the nominations and have higher chances of election. In fact, if you look at some of the political parties, the trends is that the women who are nominated and given tickets are more likely in places where you know that they will not be elected anyway. You know, there are very limited chances. So we have to hold political parties to account. Even Parliament was responsible for vetting the cabinet secretaries and the principal secretaries. Now, the president has given you 7 out of 21 names for CSs, 11 out of 51 for PSs. They should have simply returned those names and said, no, listen, under Article 27, we require that there should be not less, at least not more than 2/3 representation of one gender. This list that you have given in terms of the nomination of people to your government does not meet this requirement. Give us a list that reflects this provision of the Constitution. That is what Parliament should have done. So across the board, when even GEC, I keep on wondering and questioning what is the role of GEC. I'm not hearing them loud enough in regard to this, but I would like to look at it from an aspect of accountability. But then there's also something else that we have failed to do. When you look at in terms of equalizing or creating a fair ground for women and young people, PWDs, to be able to compete fairly for political positions. When you look at the issue of campaign financing, we have been unwilling to enforce that particular law 10 years, more than 10 years after it was actually enacted. And until we ensure that there is greater transparency and accountability in terms of where money for campaigns is coming from, how that money is being used, then women and young people will always fall behind in terms of being able to compete fairly for some of these positions. Because I believe there are certain things we're able to do, like ensure that there's a level of equity in terms of how much am I raising, how much am I spending in the campaigns. Then you give some of these politically disenfranchised sections of the population a higher chance of getting some of those positions, but we haven't been able to enact that particular piece of law. And I believe that that's one law that will help us in regard to ensuring that there is better representation of women and other marginalized sections of the community in political positions, and not just political elected positions, but even in positions where they need to be appointed.
Indeed. And maybe because we're almost out of time now, just very quick remarks as we wind up on this conversation. And even as we do that, so there are ongoing negotiations right now by the political divide in terms of, these bipartisan talks and their proposal to amend the Constitution to include some things like additional constituencies. There's the issue of the office of Prime Minister and so on. I want to get your thoughts on that. Well, certainly amendments are not a bad thing, but some of these amendments, some would say, cater to just a few, to the interest of a few at the expense of the public interest. Kawive, your thoughts as we move forward 13 years down the line? You say there's still hope, but what more can we do?
I think, let me first comment on those talks. I think we should see these talks that are going on as bipartisan talks, not national dialogue.
And not a national dialogue conversation?
That's not a national dialogue. Let's not cheat ourselves. Actually, that branding should be removed. So they are bipartisan talks between parties who have got a dispute. If we want to have national dialogue, then it should have a national character. And I think we all understand what that means. And then number two, I think in terms of what needs to be done, I think the government has got a responsibility of educating its officers on what the meaning and the spirit of every clause in the Constitution is. This morning, I was stopped by a police officer, and he asked me, "Excuse me, sir, can you give me a lift?" And I said, "Yeah, get it." So we drove with him to town, and I asked him, "What does this constitution mean for you?" You know what he told me? Jana hiyo ni mambo ya siasa. Just like that. So and that is an elite person, somebody who is read, gone to school, amesoma mambo ya uskari.
Right.
And when he said that, I couldn't talk, because it doesn't mean anything. So if we cascade that up government, and we see the actions of the president, which do not cohere with the constitution, this one and the last one, and everybody, there should be an understanding within government. What does it mean?
Okay.
And what does it imply
Right.
for our work? So when we start that behavior change process with government workers, then it is easy to deal with behavior change in communities.
All right.
The people who don't elect women because they don't understand can actually be motivated by government and educated to ensure that happens. Yeah.
So that's the conundrum that we're facing right now.
Yes.
Anjira, your final thoughts just very quickly as well.
My final thoughts on this discussion on Katiba is, first of all, to the parents of this country. We start our children on religious education very early, but we do not discuss the laws of the land, the supreme law of the land. So if we can have the responsibility of discussing a little bit of the constitution with our kids, even gifting them when they turn like 15 on their birthdays a Katiba, so that we have a generation that's growing up conversant with the laws of the land, conversant with their responsibilities as Kenyan citizens, I think we would make a step, because the constitution is still fairly new to a majority of Kenyans, despite being 13 years older. And in terms of the bipartisan talks, I think that the only reason Kenyans were on the streets was because of the high cost of living. And if is not addressed, I don't think it will mean anything for us as wananchi in this country. And as Kaiva has said, if there are discussions, there can be no discussions about us without us. We need to include Kenyans as stakeholders, because I heard this is a government of stakeholders. Kenyans as stakeholders to these discussions.
All right, Cornelius, your final thoughts. Well, she says it well. If the people are not involved, then that is not a conversation, because certainly by the design of the constitution, the voice of the people is paramount in any conversation.
Yeah, I want to agree with Kaive that these are bipartisan talks. For us from the civil society, we are watching for a multi-sectoral approach where key stakeholders, political side, non-state actors, civil society, religious are also involved in this kind of, so that they can really comply with what will be called a national dialogue.
Right.
And I draw this, if anything, what should be discussed here is that we've seen a cyclic phase of violence after every election. I think what must be addressed is how we can fast track electoral reforms in this country.
Right.
Because we've seen that our elections have not been able to enable us to solve our political differences amicably. So after every election, there are issues that needs to be addressed that leads to either some kind of violence, political instability. So what we must address is how to fix our election.
Right.
And if the bipartisan talks to do anything, is to have a very objective way of resolving how we do our elections in a way that perpetuates our democratic processes, as opposed to creating divisions in the country. So let's fast track, because we've been lagging behind in key electoral reforms, such that every election has issues that now must take us to this kind of acrimonious relationship that must be solved outside using extra parliamentary means.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And Sheila, your final thoughts as well for our young democracy that is still growing at this point.
First, on the issue of the talks, I struggle to see the public interest. I still feel that it's not inclusive, and I agree that it's not national or public-centered in nature as it's currently constructed. And the fact that even the issues that have been brought on the table are not even canvassed among citizens, not unchecked with citizens to understand what are the key issues. Because even remember the cost of living aspect came much later. It's almost like a by the way, and there are other more political interests that rank higher in that list of priorities that are to be discussed or dialogued. So it will have been good to understand what are the issues from citizens, because for me the key issue, as has been said by my co-panelists, is the cost of living. But even for us to be able to address the cost of living, then I would expect that issues around runaway corruption, because we're here in this conundrum of the inflation and high debt levels because of corruption. Right. So we must address the issue of corruption, and even the cost of running government, the high public wage bill. I've not seen a keenness in government to actually effect austerity measures that they keep talking about, because people are still operating as if it's business as usual, and there's lots of money flowing to run government. But those are the kind of conversations that I would expect, so that we're able to manage and give citizens some level of comfort in terms of how we are living and how our ability to be able to realize, particularly Article 43 rights on social and economic rights in regard to our right to food, right to health, right to education. Because right now, all this, the cost of basic goods and services, even education, which is enshrined in our constitution, even health, medicines, is so high that many citizens are unable to afford it. But we must address the issue of corruption and even the high public wage bill to be able to deal with that. My last thought on the constitution is, I think it's momentous and significant that this constitution is turning 13. And it's not a teenager. But we also need to remember that when someone is becoming a teenager, normally it heralds, the start of what we call turbulent years, adolescence, puberty, and so on. And I really hope that because of all the challenges that we've had in terms of implementing the constitution so far, we are not going to go into that period in terms of teenagehood. So we must do much more. I still struggle to understand the ownership by government in regard to this constitution. The fact that we are here, all civil society, I know that the church has also is playing a role, because we are partnering with them in regard to commemorating this year's Katiba commemoration, but you're not hearing government. Where are the state actors? Where are the independent commissions? Which institution of government is holding this baby of the constitution? No, you've not had that concern among them, or even that acknowledgement that the constitution is turning 13. And that's an indication that basically, if we don't hold this government to accountable, they will drop this baby. So as citizens, we must take that call and ensure that we hold this constitution tight and hold government accountable for the implementation of it.
All right, holding the constitution tight and the issue of accountability. Our teenager is 13 years old. That's the constitution, and we will continue to unpack the progress that we've made so far as a nation and where we are. Well, certainly that is what we had lined up for you this morning. Thank you for engaging us. Let's continue having the conversation. The hashtag is AM Live NTV at NTV Kenya. Zainab Ismail. I was with Cornelius Odwar, Deputy Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission this morning. Sheila Masinde, the Executive Director, Transparency International Kenya. Kawive Wambua, Deputy CEO, Inuka Kenya Nisisi, and Wanjira Wanjiru, the co-founder of the Mathare Social Justice Center. Thank you so much for joining us this morning to have this conversation. This is where we wind up as we wait for Winnie Lubembe to come into studio for Your World. You want to stay tuned for that. My name is Zainab Ismail. Have yourself a good morning and good day.